Welcome to the Fresno Steering Committee. Thank you for being here tonight. We have very exciting news that Jamie wants to share.
Table A, for lack of a better, Table 1 has advocated, and we're going to go get some coffee. So thank Table 1. Anthony's going to go run to Starbucks and get a traveler of coffee, because I think it's a good idea, too.
Okay. In addition to super exciting caffeine, we also have different food. So please notice the food. Yay! We have different food tonight. Help yourself at any time, like always. If you don't know me, my name is Crystal. I'm with the Institute for Local Government. I'm helping to facilitate tonight. So I'll be making sure that we stay on track and move in and accomplish our goals. The bathrooms are in the back corner over there. Help yourself at any time. And again, if you have any questions or concerns at any point, just use your voice and we'll come talk to you. So we're going to start with some brief introductions from both CARB and the Air District and a community member. And then we're going to have a short presentation from Brian from CARB. And then we're going to jump into the meat of the meeting, which are these small group discussions around the mobile source strategies. We're going to do a short report out afterwards and then talk about next steps. Any questions about what we're going to do tonight? Okay, I have one favor to ask. Please, if you don't already have headsets around your neck, please grab a set and have them already ready to go. So even if you don't necessarily need them for Spanish assistance, please put them on, or at least have them around your neck so you can actively hear our Spanish-speaking members, should it arise. Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump into Karen's welcome remarks.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, everyone. Karen Maliano with CARB. As Crystal just said, want to welcome everybody and say that we are doing something a little bit different tonight. This is one where we're actually, I guess, try hosting the meeting with the district and a community co-host, which is Ivanka Saunders. And what we wanted to do was then also work together to define what would be a really useful agenda for everyone to walk through tonight. We know that this past year was a rapid pace, and there was a lot to get through. And as we now move into this next step of the program, this is a great opportunity to be able to sit down and really now dive more deeply into the strategies that are in the plan, understanding what they are, how they're going to work in terms of implementation. And it was suggested that a good place to start, especially since we're one of the co-hosts tonight, was to do that looking at all the mobile source strategies in the plan overall. So what the plan is tonight, as Crystal mentioned, is a quick overview, just as a refresher of what some of those core CARB strategies are, but then really spend some time at each of the tables, and it sounds like we may need to sort of condense down tables so that there's a chance for all of you to talk with CARB staff and district staff and others about what those are, what the next steps are, and as she said, then talk about, what are the next steps as we move forward with this? We also definitely would like the public to be able to participate in these table groups as well. The other thing that I wanted to point out was that we also have a couple of different posters here in the room. So if you want to take a break from the table group or you've gotten through all of your questions before we're ready to move on to the next item, or at the end of the meeting, over here, and Jeremy can raise his hand, we have a poster about idling of trucks. We know that that is something that has been brought up, questions about what the current approaches are, how enforcement is done. We've done some additional work, and so it's an opportunity to talk about what those efforts are and additional things that CARB is looking at. The other thing that I also wanted to point out is that we have a couple of different posters over here on the windows. And that is also a chance for you if you want to put up some sticky notes that you have on your tables and give us a little more feedback on your perspective on this process over the past year. So, what have you seen as some of the key strengths of the program? What would you like our board to know as we take that next step to having it considered by our board? And especially sort of any lessons learned from this process. Not only, as you might see, as this committee goes forward, but how you can help future committees as well as we look to these and expand the program overall. So again, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to the district for all their work in helping to organize this and different food. Tonight, though, we know Brian actually really wanted the taquitos, so he's a little bit disappointed. So have that understanding as he's giving his brief. Right. And with that, I want to turn it over to John and Ivanka.
Thank you, Karen. If you haven't met me, I'm John Klassen with the Air District, and I've been at most of these meetings here throughout this process. So first, I just want to thank the committee for all their hard work over this past year or so. We've been working together on developing the community emission reduction program. I want to thank the public, too, for their involvement in getting to this point so we can review this together. And I want to especially thank CARB staff for being here tonight, co-hosting this meeting. They have a lot of staff here tonight. A lot of time was taken. A lot of folks drove down to be able to put up these informative posters and develop this exercise for the committee and the public to go through tonight. So thank you to CARB for doing this, for all of your efforts. And I just want to encourage the committee and the public to be involved in this exercise tonight. Really think about it, provide your input. That's really going to assist CARB as they prepare to go forward to their board in February, where this SERP is going to be considered by the CARB board. So thank you for being here tonight, for all your hard work throughout the year, and please be as engaged as you can tonight through this exercise. And Ivanka is now going to make a few comments.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ivanka Saunders. I am, during the day job, an advocate for environmental justice, if you didn't know that already. And what we wanted to try, like Karen said, this is all new year, so we're still trying new things. The reason I'm up here co-leading is not just going to be me. It could be you at our next meeting. We want to make sure that this is truly community driven, and so this is an attempt to get back to that. A lot of times we've been hearing feedback that we're coming in, we have a chance to listen to a presentation, but it's so deep that we're not having enough time to do discussions and enough time to do questions. And a lot of times, those of us that are in the environmental justice work on a daily basis and working with you guys outside of tonight, we might be hearing some more of those comments that we're not actually able to discuss at each table. So I'm sure that's not just me, that's any of you that are on the steering committee. You could be getting more information outside of this space that could be really valuable in this space. So we want to try this. I am co-leading, which pretty much means as we do tonight, when we actually do our individual tables, if I'm hearing a conversation about information that I might have more details on, I'll speak up on that. We want to see if this works, if it's helpful, and we definitely want to hear everyone's feedback of any other ideas that could help make this more a community-driven process. So thank you.
Great.
Go team.
Thanks, Ivanka. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brian for a quick presentation. There you are.
Hello all, it's Brian. I'm back to talk again about CARB mobile strategies. But in addition to the strategies, I want to let everyone know that we have some enforcement people here, if you guys have questions about that. We also have some monitoring experts and also some people from our transportation division. So questions? Oh, sure, we can do that. So let's go with monitoring first. Megan. And oh, sure, come on up.
Carb, move up. You want to come up?
So come on, so we got Megan McKay, who works in our monitoring and laboratory division. If you have monitoring questions, let's go with Neva Lowry. Come on up. I feel like Bob Barker here. This is kind of fun. So Neva Lowry works in our incentives, and what's critical to know is that line up. They want to see you. Right. So CARB not only we run some of our own incentives, but many of the programs that the district administers, CARB, we write the guidelines for those incentive programs. So Neva knows all that kind of stuff. Let's go with enforcement. We have 2 enforcement experts here. We have Justin and Natalie coming up. So any questions about mobile source enforcement, they can either answer them or they can get back to you and answer them if they're not sure about the answer now. And we also have Dylan from our transportation division. So a lot of our mobile sources, heavy-duty trucks, that our transportation division takes care of that stuff. And we also have Chandon and Jeremy work in the other presentation. They're in our technical staff, so we have questions about how our emissions inventory with the mobile trucks is formulated, how we did community assessment, during the selection process. They're the ones to go to for that.
And they're easy to find because they're wearing matching shirts.
Yes. The color is smoke, which is kind of ironic for what we do, but that's when we selected. We have Anna Scodell back there at the table. Raise your hand, Anna. She is... So, okay, and while Anna's running up really quick, so Anna is one of our policy experts, and she was one of the main authors of all the good parts of the blueprint. She wants to, that. All the parts you like of the blueprint, Anna made those parts. And we also have Trish Johnson, which I think a lot of you have met, right? Awesome.
Come on up, Trish.
And so she's with our EJ unit. So anything related to our broader environmental justice program at CARB, she can answer those questions. Community air grants, she's pretty knowledgeable with those as well. And Jennifer Magar, right here, raise her hand. This is her first day. So she's a new member of OCAP, and she comes from enforcement as well. So she has some enforcement background, as well as Justin and Natalie. And we got, Karen Buckley, my boss, who I never forget. So Karen Buckley is the boss of my section, and so Anna and I report to Karen. So she's on the policy side as well with OCAP and can answer questions also regarding the blueprint and the general process that we have in our office. Cool. Okay, I think that's it. Cool. So again, just to reintroduce you to the mobile source strategy. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. That got me all excited. Is that better? Okay. So to reintroduce you to our mobile source strategies, what we did, these are about the 5 main buckets that we divide our strategies into, just thinking about the concerns of this community. So we have the heavy-duty trucks, looking at warehouses and distribution centers, the small engines, so these are like under 25 horsepower that you see with lawn and garden equipment. We'll go over some of the passenger car, new regulations, amendments, and then also talk about trains. So on the heavy-duty truck side, most of the state strategies kind of have two main goals. They're either trying to increase compliance with trucks, so that's like, oh, you guys mind? Right. Sure. Okay. Well, thank you. So yeah, so we could have everybody else a little quieter. That'd be good. Ooh, that's real quiet. Okay. So going back to heavy-duty trucks. So a lot of these new regulations or amendments to regulations look to either increase compliance by using like real-world screening of trucks, or developing like the analogous to like the smog check you'll have to do with your passenger cars. To register with the DMV, you have to pass smog. Some of these new amendments will require that of heavy-duty trucks. There's also a new reg, that Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, that is looking to increase the adoption of zero-emission trucks where that can be used. So like Amazon trucks or UPS trucks, the short-haul ones, where there are zero-emission options available. That's what this regulation is trying to do, is speed up adoption of that, requiring a certain number of zero-emission vehicles to be sold. To the warehousing, the first thing that we're doing, CARB is developing a freight handbook, which will serve as like a guidance document about how to site, construct, and operate new freight facilities, kind of like a best practices guide. The idea of using zero-emission equipment when available, and then also having the infrastructure to charge these zero-emission vehicles. And then the next 3 kind of focus on the types of equipment or trucks that will be visiting warehouses. So you have those drayage trucks, the short-haul trucks, getting those zero-emission, and then looking at the equipment that is working at the warehouse either loading trucks, like forklifts, things like that, accelerating those to zero emissions as well. With our small engines, we do have a small engine standard. It's actually a tailpipe emission standard coming out of small engines. It hasn't been updated since about 1990. So our board is going to visit that this next year and make more stringent emission requirements for these small engines.
It hasn't been updated since when?
1990.
1990.
Which sounds like a long time, but I think we might be, I'm almost positive we're the only state that looks at these small sources. And the thing is when in 1990, when this was passed, there were a small percentage, but cars are getting so much cleaner that these small engines are going to contribute more and more to emissions overall.
Thank you.
Sure. Moving on to passenger cars. So the advanced clean cars are looking at making more stringent tailpipe emissions for passenger cars. And another big one that you guys maybe have heard of, this idea of catalytic converter theft, that they're getting stolen for the metals that are inside of these. We are trying to start a reg where manufacturers will have to stamp the identification number of the car on the catalytic converter. So when that's turned into recycle, the recycler will know that that catalytic converter is from a car that the person doesn't have, to try to reduce theft. Because the catalytic converters only work when they're on the car, yeah. And with trains, especially looking at Cowell with the rail yard there, we're looking at passing some amendments to reduce idling at rail yards, not only of the trains, but of all the combustion equipment that loads the train, the switchers, forklifts, cranes, things like that. We're trying to reduce idling. And for maintenance too and testing of that train, we want to keep the idling down. The second one, we'd also like to reduce emissions from locomotives, especially the ones that are just staying within the state, because we can look at emissions with those trains. And we'd also like to work with the US EPA for those interstate trains to try to come either to some kind of voluntary agreement with penalties to reduce emissions from those interstate trains. Cool. And that's all I have for the primer. And the idea is that we can look at these 5 buckets of strategies within your groups. And again, if you have questions about incentives or enforcement outside of mobile source strategies, just raise your hand and we can make sure the right staffer can come talk to you at the table. That's all I got.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, any questions for Brian before we jump into the next piece? Okay. So, in a minute, I'm going to have you, if you are a member of the public, come and join one of the small groups. There's enough space for, I think, roughly about 5 or 6 people per group. We'll try to balance. Just a sec, Lisa. If you need Spanish-speaking language translation, if you could sit in one of these 2 groups, and then we'll have the translators move on this side, that would be great. But yeah, we'll try to balance the groups. In each group, you're going to have a CARB facilitator and a CARB note taker. But in addition to that, I'd love for somebody from each of the groups to volunteer to be the reporter. So at the end of this, after we talk through the different mobile source strategies and what kind of changes or actions or input you'd like to share with CARB or request, the note taker is going to capture them here, and then the reporter is going to report out. Each small group will have a couple minutes to share, and then we'll sort of touch on that. Lisa, what is your question?
My question has always been the same question I've been asking for the longest time about attendance and the members of this committee. If you look at the tables of the individuals here, we tend to be the most committed. There's, close to 40, 45 people on this committee. There's not even 20 of us here. My question is to the powers that be is, I requested more than 6 months ago for phone numbers, contact information, so I could reach out to the committee to see how come people are not coming, and to encourage them to actually show up. And I've asked and have received nothing. And I've also asked the powers that be, both at the local and state level, to find out this information, and nothing has been reported back. So I sit here on very bad knees asking, anybody got any information, or am I wasting my time asking?
No, I think it's an excellent question. Jamie?
We actually agree that membership and attendance has become to be an issue. So one of the things that we've done recently is begin to audit and see, okay, who's been coming, who hasn't been coming. There's actually a couple people that have never come, and I want to, I'm going to embarrass her right now. There's one person that has never missed a meeting, and that is Ivanka. So attendance award goes to Ivanka. So we did think that we would get through the holidays because we know we're getting into kind of that rough time of year for people. And then in January, come back with a little bit of an audit, kind of where we are, and ask you all, how do we want to move forward? We still always need to have 50% plus one have to be residents. So do we want to make the committee smaller? Does that mean that we need to kick people off the committee? How do we address all this? So we need to kind of figure out, go through that audit, make sure we have who's been here, who hasn't been here, reach out to those folks that maybe they were coming but they haven't come again, and figure out the next steps, because we too see that this is a little bit of a unfortunate situation, and now that we're getting into the, like, you know, putting meat on the bone, I think we need people here.
Yeah, so I would say if you have any thoughts or feelings about what Jamie just shared, come talk to her during this meeting, after this meeting, give her a call anytime.
Well, I guess, yes, we need to regroup and see who is still committed. But my question is, you're saying something about, oh, we're approaching the holidays, true, but at the same time, we're against the clock one more time before the cardboard approves the SERP. So your comment was because there's not going to be a meeting in December, is that? Okay, and then we're going to go back to the same point. We were not able to see this document in it completely before it was approved by the Air District Board. Now we're going to run out of time again, and Cardboard is going to approve it without us still giving all our feedback.
So that's an excellent point to put on one of these posters over here. So a lot of this meeting is about the mobile sources that we're going to have discussions about in the small groups. But in addition to that, as time allows, please make suggestions like that over there. That will help them understand what could be improved as we move forward and how the round two communities could start off differently. Okay. So,
So I think it's important for year two communities to learn from our lessons, and we were building this plane as we were flying it. But what I'm saying, I'm interested in finalizing this process and this SERP the best way that we can. And we shouldn't just drop the towel and say, we're in holiday mode, we're done. And if I'm going to put some comments on the sticky notes or the notepads, but it's going to happen the same that it happened during the summer. I put a bunch of notes, and not everything made it to the SERP. So,
okay, just a second. So I will say there are an extraordinarily large number of CARB staff here today. So I want to make sure we take advantage of them tonight. So please, let's use the time we have here, and then we can keep talking about how that. I'm going to go Lisa and then Ivanka, but I do want to move into the small groups. So after that, we're going to go one-on-one.
Okay, I don't know if the Air District staff remember back in February, March, I actually predicted some of this behavior that was going to happen, that the Air District and the powers that be would run the clock and put us into a situation where we had to accept what was presented, and you not really taking advantage of the community input. I keep coming to these meetings, and if I have to put one more sticky anything up on a board, I'm going to seriously, I don't want to scream, but it is redundant. People that are here from various staffs, you need to do your job. You need to listen to us. You need to bring back the proper document. You need to do the best for the community and for the people that you represent. That is your function of your position, of your employment. I seriously, back in February, I predicted that the clock was going to be run and we were all going to be put between a rock and a hard place about approving insufficient documents. You guys knew better.
I just want to remind the steering committee that we are a voting steering committee. We have the right to motion. And I think, Crystal, when we're saying put it on the sticky, or put it on the board and we'll come back to it later, that is part of the frustration of the steering committee is if we're not being heard tonight, will that get ignored later? And so we have the right to motion, and I would like to motion that we do have a meeting in December within those first 2 weeks. It's right between Thanksgiving and right before Christmas, so I think we can squeeze something in December.
That's a lot of seconding. So I am not in charge of meetings.
I can take that back. We can look into it. I can't guarantee that we're going to have one, though. You guys can recommend one, but I can't guarantee. I know that some of these people are involved. We have about 4 workshops on things that were in the SERP that some of you are also involved in. There was one today, and I think a couple people were at the one today. So we're now to an implementation phase, and I will tell you, we're not amending the SERP. I said that at the last meeting. I'll say it again. The SERP is not going back to our board. We are in an implementation phase, and there's lots of room within that implementation phase to fine-tune all of these things. There's not a clock on that. We are beginning a fine-tune process. There's a there is a I hear you, and I'm going to tell you that we have submitted the SERP to CARB, and we're not amending the SERP. So we are now focused on implementation, and there is, for example, there is a lot of strategies within the SERP where there is an opportunity to do a lot of the things that the public wanted. Number 1 on the list was urban greening. What does that mean? Where are we going to put trees? How are trees?
So there's a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Jamie, we need to have a vote. Okay. There's a charter. This group voted on the charter. The charter was accepted. It's still in force. So please honor the process. Take a vote on this issue.
Sure.
You guys will do what you're going to do, and then we'll do what we're going to do. But at least honor the process of these people and take the vote, please.
Okay, I wasn't here when you guys did votes in the past, so I saw a motion. Yes. So, does everyone raise hands? How do we do this? Okay, so there was a motion to have a meeting in December. Those that support the motion, raise your hands. And then we count hands, yes? Sorry, again, sort of new. Okay. Okay.
And Jamie, can I get the contact list with the numbers or email or something for everybody on this committee, please?
I do not feel comfortable in giving personal contact information out. Crystal, not.
Okay. I'm going to.
Not with phone numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
If you guys want to take a vote about whether or not we give out personal contact information, you're more than welcome.
I think framing it that way is challenging. I would be more, if people are comfortable having their email or their phone number shared.
Yeah, because we talked about not
As being a steering committee member,
Okay. Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry, you go for it.
They can't hear. Okay. So what I would like to do. Lisa's made a request for contact information for each of the steering committee members to be shared. So I think what we'd like to do moving forward is, hold on. If you do not feel comfortable with your contact information being shared on the roster, I would say let Jamie know. Okay, if you do feel comfortable, then let Jamie know. But we need to move forward. So I'm going to ask that this conversation move off to the side, and we're going to move into the small groups. Okay, the groups are not evenly distributed, and that's somewhat okay if the public comes over and joins some of these tables over here. But I would say this group is fairly large. If this becomes too big, then we can break it up a little bit. Okay, this is table 1. Table 1's table facilitator is Anna. Anna, if you could raise your hands. And Natalie is going to take notes. And there's your Natalie. Okay, table 2 is being facilitated by Brian. And Dylan is going to take notes. Table 3 is Trish facilitating, and Neva is going to take notes. And table 4 is Karen Buckley facilitating, and Jennifer is going to take notes. And again, please designate somebody in your group to do the report out and make sure that that person is prepared to do so, and that everything on the flip charts is legible. There are a lot of subject matter experts in the room floating around to help if you have any questions. If at your table you have a question that nobody can answer, please raise your hand and we'll find someone for you. We're going to have about 40 minutes to do this exercise, and we'll give you a couple time checks as we get through. All right? Let's go. However, we're going to ask folks to pause and say thank you so much. That was a really impressive discussion. Okay, we're going to start over here with group number 1, and we're going to start with Genevieve, who's going to take 2 minutes and summarize key points and actions and how to operationalize this.
Okay, hello everyone, Genevieve. I'm going to try to go through the list of actions or recommendations. One was a concern about giving $5 million for the change out of just 2 locomotives. And the ask was to move some of that money toward electric school buses, as well as, is this not captured in here? The study for the truck route rerouting. The next is providing an opportunity for residents to provide locations for targeted mobile source enforcement, perhaps having a map and having people point to where they want enforcement or where they've seen issues in the past. And we also want more frequent enforcement, so more than just 4 times a year. There was a conversation about outreach for different incentive programs and how there could be a larger outreach strategy, including door-to-door canvassing, social media, radio and TV advertisements, making sure it's multilingual, multicultural, and also flyers to students. There was also a comment about prioritizing funding that's designated for heavy-duty trucks to go towards small owner-operators, making sure that there's equity in that funding. So perhaps 60% of the funds goes to those who own 1 to 5 trucks. We already said this, prioritize funding to small truckers. There was also a conversation around the public vehicles and how we'd like to see a backstop rule or regulation on those incentives, such as requiring fleet standards within the contracts for the public fleets. There was also conversation that we want a better understanding of the emissions trade-off between different vehicle types, including natural gas trucks, electric trucks, diesel trucks, biodiesel trucks, and perhaps having putting this on the Community Steering Committee agenda for discussion and using what we learned to prioritize the funding for different types of equipment. I'm not going to be able to say this as well as Venice, but making sure that public health outcomes are used as a baseline for tracking progress over time, and we're also using public health indicators as prioritizing where we focus our investments and our investments, enforcement, all the measures that we're really focusing on public health as being the what we use to prioritize our actions. Lastly, that the public should be engaged in a transparent process of over the funding and funding allocations, and continuing to learn how the funding is being spent and how we can direct funding as we move forward. And we should also be leveraging additional funding that's at the state level, the private level, national level, so that we're not all just relying on this small SERP pot. Is that all? Okay, thanks.
Some round of applause for group 1. Table 2. Oh, sorry.
We also discussed at our table is that when we're talking to people about AB 617, that we wanted to use the public health aspect to bring people in. So when we're talking about air quality and health issues like asthma, respiratory issues, to bring them in so they can understand all of the things that we have as a steering committee put in priority to get done here in Fresno.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, group 2.
Okay, group 2, we kind of got stuck on a couple of just main topics for the whole time. We were talking about intersections, idling, heavy traffic, and then enforcement of that idling, and part of it was a couple of heavy intersections, Central and North Avenue, and we did bring up that Caltrans has said they're going to redo those, and hopefully it'll come out better when they redo those interchanges. One of the comments that came up with idling that's going on in a certain area, Jensen and Elm, but there's no signs and the public doesn't know how to report it or where to. So it was getting signs out that identify for the trucker that they're not supposed to idle, with signs that also have the citation and the phone number for the community to be able to call in and report it. And then there was talk about enforcement and the fines or money that's gotten from that enforcement being put back into that community to help the community or used in one of the 617 communities for improvements. The other one was when the calls come in for enforcement, there was questions on what's the agreement between the district and CARB for how we get an enforcement person there in a timely manner to catch the person or get them to stop acting. What are the other stuff we had? What did I miss? Flip? Oh, that was part of it. So the SEPs, the supplemental environmental projects, and that was part of, can the funding stay within the community where the violations occurred? Can we keep it tight in there? 50% of the violation fines can go to a SEP. The person who gets the citation gets to pick which project in there. There's questions on where the SEP funds go, but there's a list of programs you can pick from. Oh, the district, that's right. Where do district SEP funds go? So district-wide, there was a question on where those go, and if we can narrow that down, that it has to actually, they can't pick from this big long list, and the violation was here, and yet the money is going to be used somewhere far away. And can CERT projects receive SEP funding as well in there? I know, acronyms. Did I miss anything else? So a lot of discussion on that.
Can I get a round of applause for group number 2? All right, who was sharing for group 3? Aha!
I'm ready. Okay, so many comments overlap to what our previous tables discussed, so I'll try to go fast on those. So for zero emission technologies, we really want to make, the residents recommend prioritizing the funding to go
to small businesses. So by that, we're defining small, like 7 trucks or less. So no 50 or something. So, and then they would like to make sure that before saying so much money or that percentage of the 7.5 million is going to go to zero emissions or near zero emissions, they would like to have a better understanding of the emissions coming from the different types of trucks. So we can really make sure that the funding is going towards really reducing emissions for whatever technology we are prioritizing. The other thing is we were told that for the most part the inspections were unannounced, but if it's in writing and sure that that's the case, they feel more assured that it's going to be more effective. They feel that quarterly inspections are not that often, needs to be more often, and that there's a number. They were telling us, oh, you can report the air district, you can report CARB. Well, maybe you need to add to the signs that says not idling the number how to report. And I think that the number that CARB has right now is only in English. You call and it's a recording in English, so that's not going to cut it for residents in this area reporting. So that needs to be fixed. So if the air district is going to make signs, make sure that you put the reporting number and then the message is in English and Spanish. They would like to have more, they feel they could be inspectors. Right now, one of the residents shows a video of something happening 2 blocks from here in the middle of the day. So how can the air district and the CARB take advantage of the local residents who are walking and driving these communities on a daily basis? So you cannot get more often inspections than that. So they could be your inspectors. Health clear. And there was an example of Lions, a company just here, that actually made us realize that there's an issue. Sometimes the idling is happening and it's also creating a lot of traffic. So there has to be a discussion with the city. If that's the case, what can the city do? And then in addition to the, finding them for idling, because in this particular case of Lion, that's what is happening. So again, the jurisdiction discussion came up in this area. There was also the mention of something that happened just a couple of miles from here, south of here, Cedar and Jensen. They attended a public meeting where they said that there were going to be offices of Amazon in that location, and instead of offices, there's a place where all their vans, the Mercedes-Benz vans that you can see now making all the distributions, that's where they are operating. And the residents felt they were not properly informed by the city, and that when they permitted that, they were not considering the fact that next door there's a Wawona packing shed, and on the other side there's the post office. So there was a lot of traffic going on in that area, and they're just aggravated by permitting that as well. So how can the residents be actually in the know of when these permits are happening, and how can the air emissions be considered before permitting those facilities? The other thing is that there's a question. There's a strategy about promoting biodiesel as a source of cleaner energy. So is that the case? How much less emissions that type of energy produces? And then there was a lot of discussion about moving the money from the 5.4 million for the 2 locomotives to fund more school buses, but at the same time to fund the rerouting study that was also mentioned over there. So I think those were it. Yes? Is that it? Yeah. Oh, excuse me. The buses, the school buses, they want the buses to go to Fresno Unified School District. So 14 buses is not a lot, 15, because there were going to be 16 buses. One was given away already in Malaga Elementary, but really 15 buses is not a lot to split them between 3 school districts. So they believe that they should be going to Fresno Unified Schools. and that the amount that they were cutting down from the locomotives should be added to fund more buses. I think that's it. And they just once again reiterated that there was no vote on the final SERP, no documentation provided in Spanish in writing before the board meeting.
Thank you, Group 3. Okay, and last but not least, Group 4.
I'll make ours fast because I know we all probably are going to be going over the same things as some of the other groups. First off, we looked at, talked about how we need more incentives for gas stations for further emissions reductions. We also talked about the funding amount distribution specifically for the locomotives like the other groups have talked about, and how that money could potentially be used elsewhere like the other groups have mentioned for more buses. We also talked about how we need more trees along in the community. I know that's number one on the top of the list for our strategies on our handout tonight. We did talk about more funding needed for heavy-duty diesel trucks to improve emissions, and then also we need more incentives. And then specifically, also, we talked about what Brian talked about with the catalytic converters and who would be responsible for enforcing the people receiving the catalytic converters to make sure that they're actually going to be checking the VIN or actually turning them in, turning the criminals in, whoever steals it. And then last, we just talked about how in the evening, there seems to be higher VOCs in the evening than there is during the day. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Group 4. Okay, before we wrap up, I noticed in each of these groups, well, one, some pretty fantastic and very specific recommendations, which is fantastically awesome. But two, there were some questions in here that I think we have folks in the room that could address tonight. So I'm going to ask CARB staff, district staff, Ivanka, to maybe come up and see if there's anything in each of these, and we'll kind of go group by group, that we can touch on or have a quick answer to or sort of address while we have a few minutes here.
Yes. There's even a third one over there if we want to go with 3.
Yes.
All this stuff is fantastic. This is all in line with what we mean when we say let's figure out some of the details of implementation. This is exactly the type of dialogue we plan to have, and are so excited that you guys have already begun, so thank you for that. Locomotives, no one cares about locomotives. We hear that, and moving money around. At our table, I know there was some discussion about there are different types of locomotives and different types of rail projects. Some are little spur lines, and they do operate kind of just a few miles at a time, and they are directly in this community, and they do pollute. They're very old. And so there was some dialogue about maybe better understanding what are the ones that maybe directly impact the health of the people who live in this community versus the ones that maybe travel up and down the valley and don't have as much impact. And that's definitely, we hear that, and we will bring more information back and have a fuller conversation about that, because buying 2 locomotives for $5 million, we hear you, and that does not seem like something you want to spend the money on.
One thing I just wanted to also add about the locomotives is that we are actually going through a process of identifying what additional regulatory actions that we can take on locomotives. And there's going to be a workshop starting in the South Coast, I think just next week, but the goal is to also have one in other areas of the state. So San Joaquin Valley will be an important one. So that's not only incentives, but really how do we start turning over the fleet through a regulatory process. Right.
Correct.
But then we want to be informed by what you all see as the needs within this community, because it helps us drive, as health protective a regulation as we can. A couple of the things that I think came up on here is, right, how do we get information out to people. A lot, I think, questions, not only in this one, but I think almost on all of the tables, is on enforcement-related information. And I know Justin and Natalie have been talking to some of these groups, but in terms of a follow-up from CARB, I think a number of them would be working with you to actually refine, what are those specific locations that you all would like to see some focused work, whether it's by the district, who is here, or when we do more organized kinds of enforcement actions. Also, I think coming back and providing more information and training on our supplemental environmental project, because what we really want is for all of you to submit ideas for those, and then we can help target when violators do come along to select the ones that support this community. So we can provide training on how can you submit an idea. And then the other piece of this would be training, and this is one of the strategies that's already in there from our staff on, what are those fundamentals of enforcement for community members? How do you file an effective complaint? So we can make a commitment to figure out when is the best time to sit down with the group on this.
And on the part of that too is maybe a mapping exercise where folks can mark, hey, this is a trouble area for idling, this is a trouble area for, dirty trucks, whatever it might be.
I would just say to add to that training on the CARB SERP, a training on the Air District SERP, so that, we have a full picture.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. One of the things is the nexus between what we're discussing tonight related directly to CARB and what does that plan look like in writing as far as those amendments or those refining. If we're not amending, then what are those refinements that can actually be included in the SERP that we're working with? And it's not just, we don't want just the CARB to be taking away this information, but how is it actually going to be interconnected with this SERP for this district? And the other thing, when we were talking about the trains, when we were talking about that amount, that is just an example of how the steering committee really does want to dig deeper into the actual amounts attached to all the measures, not just that one. And keeping the focus, as the example of the trains, yes, switchers, trains versus switchers, switchers might be a little cheaper than the big locomotives, but if we are going to upgrade switchers that are in certain rail yards, then we really want to make sure that these fundings are going to the rail yards within this boundary and not per se maybe the one up on the north end of 99, because we have some bigger ones right in the 617 boundary. And again, that's still a generalization that is touching on all the measures, whether we were talking about air filtration, whether we're talking about switchers or buses. 16 buses, well, those 16, 15, 14 buses need to go to the routes that are staying within the 617, to those schools within 617, and to those schools concentrating air filtration systems, not just the filters per year that are going to replace in these for all of 56 schools in the district, because it's just, it will just literally be replacing filters and not upgrading old schools with old systems. So even though we're talking specifics, it goes into the general connection of all the measures within the SERP.
No, I think that's great. And I think, as we think about we're refining, we're operationalizing all of this based on the great discussions that happened at the table, we can commit on the ones that are related to the CARB efforts to then start putting that in writing as what does that extra level of detail look like, whether it's mapping or what combined SEP training looks like or other enforcement training. The other thing I don't know, I can't remember if it was on this one or one of the other ones, is more information about what zero emission technologies are actually available.
And fuel types.
And fuel types. I know we have that back at CARB, so we can go and pull together that information and then I think talk with all of you about how do we make it really useful and accessible to this group, so we will certainly commit to follow up
and then
on that as well.
And how does it then inform what we spend money on based on a bigger understanding of, a natural gas vehicle versus an electric vehicle versus a biodiesel versus a clean diesel? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. SEP.
Yes.
Also at the table, we discussed a lot of enforcement, and I know community is more concerned with enforcement not being as strong
SEP, sorry.
as
Supplemental Environmental Plan.
as far as maybe the measures that are getting incentive funding. So we still want to figure out those details of the measures that we do have, how much stronger can we make those? And also, back to the health impacts, you can't know the health impacts without knowing what are the quantifiable emission reductions that we're going to have. So if we don't know what the end result is by this plan, how do we know if the health impact is going to, how is it going to get better if we don't even know how much we're reducing emissions by? And so that still needs to be included somehow too.
Okay, shall we, Crystal's moving us to the next.
We kind of talked
I
on
think
more
we
than
talked a
just
lot.
one
Yeah, I know we did
tablet.
We're
touch
kind
on
of
but I want to make sure
piggybacking.
we didn't miss any key ones from some of these.
And we
other
also
ones.
heard it, I think it was on both, small business owners, really looking at small business owners. I know that table two also mentioned the importance of small business owners. And I think that's going to really be something we're going to have to work with CARB with to make sure that these incentive programs are done in such a way that the rules with which they have to be implemented allow that flexibility where you don't have to be a big company in order to have the margins with which you can then afford your matching funds to get a new truck. So one of the challenges right now, and I was just talking with Brian Dodds from our grant program, is that, and Kim knows this, we found out Kim's family had a trucking company, so she's now our trucking expert, that if you're a little guy or gal, it's really challenging to take advantage of grant programs because you're really kind of living project to projects trying to make your money come together. So we want to make sure that the grant programs have the flexibility within them so that some of those smaller business owners can take advantage of it. And that's going to take, I think some working with CARB to figure out the best way to go about that. Because we agree too, you get more bang out of your buck in a community from your small business guys.
I know one other thing that came out of here, and in several of them, were the ongoing concerns about truck idling and really just how people get better information about what they can and cannot do, and then also how they report truck idling. That was a really good point that if our reporting line is only in English, that is a problem. So we will take that back and talk to them about, what can we do so that it is more accessible, especially to communities like this here. And we'll also follow up on, I know there are standard anti-idling signs. The enforcement team often brings them around, but can we modify them and actually have on the sign itself how you report back so it makes it easier for everyone?
And I would just add to that when the SERP says collaboration with, well, this is an example of what is that going to look like? How is, a lot of community knows, oh, the air district, that's my air district, I should be reporting to them first, and maybe not realizing, mobile source is a state thing. So that collaboration right there of how we're going to enforce it and do the outreach together should be included in the SERP.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that we included there, but I forgot to mention in my report, is that for the strategy that recommends funding for the charging stations, the residents would like to see a program from the district that perhaps gives residents, low-income residents, like cards that they could use to go and use them, because what good is going to be if you have the charging station, but you still need to pay for it. So something that, not only supporting smaller businesses, but also low-income residents that live in the area. Oh, and she has a comment. Put on your headsets.
Yo solamente quiero hacerles un comentario acerca del programa del dinero que dan para hacerle el smoke a los carros, el tuning and tune-up. Desafortunadamente los mecánicos ya se pusieron, me imagino, de acuerdo cómo funciona esto y termina uno pagando más de lo que del incentivo que dan ustedes. Entonces no sé cómo se puede arreglar eso, ver qué está pasando porque no está funcionando y ese dinero se está yendo prácticamente para los mecánicos, no para la gente que lo necesita.
Y si no les da uno el dinero extra que piden, no le arreglan el carro a uno y se quedan con el voucher.
That we understand, and that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to send Brian over to talk to you about that program, because if we find out that smog shops, and we can, we have evidence of it, that they're basically gouging or abusing customers, we'll kick them out of the program. Yeah. And he also is going to talk to you about lawn care, because I forgot.
Yeah, I think there was one more on here. I think it was this one, that residents really wanting to know when there are new projects that are potentially coming forward in the permitting process, to have better access to information about it as early in the process as possible. And I think that's actually part of one of the land use strategies, that the city was going to work to make that information more accessible.
More accessible. And I know they're also working on better tools as well for the public to be able to use. So I think making sure that that information gets out and is usable is key.
Can we,
I would just add to that when we're saying notification, that the Community Steering Committee has also asked that in those parts of the SERP that are stating collaborating with or working with somebody, when those updates actually happen, that they are actually informed how and what that looks like, because of the vagueness right now of the SERP, we really don't know what that is going to look like once it's completed. And so if we're in the process of saying that, then working with these other agencies when it happens, giving that feedback to the steering committee.
I agree. A better feedback loop is I think the next big improvement we need to be making.
anything else, Ivanka or Jamie, from this one? I think we've probably covered pretty much the things that were on
I know that
the other two,
table
unless anything
4,
on these
that's-
tables that wanted to bring up, or
I know
Ivanka?
with table 4, what I think I've heard from the other is really the small owners of the truck fleets is really one of the big things that we're wanting to see for, if we're talking the incentive fundings, they could be the ones most impacted positively. Yeah. Oh, and the evening air monitoring, that one is, when I saw that, the first thing I thought was that could be knowing where we're going to place that van, or is the van or the trailer that can move, the van
The
that
van,
can
yeah.
move and actually collect data will be in places like that that come up as the high complaint areas.
I'm going to let John just talk, because I don't know, but I think our monitoring equipment will run in the evening.
I think she's going to ask about the monitoring, actually.
Yeah, just to comment on Laura's thoughts there. So the air monitoring network that we're deploying here in South Central Fresno will be measuring VOCs. That was the kind of the comment of concern. So we have specific locations that we're targeting to place our equipment. But if where you are seeing a concern with high VOCs, we'll have our van that's available to drive around those areas and take measurements. And our equipment out there will be running during the evening as well. So we'll see if there's any kind of suspicious spikes of VOCs happening at nighttime too.
On the northeast side of the height of the school, the one near the Rio Bravo biomass plant, I think is the PM 2.5. I got another high reading when the wind was coming from the east again to confirm my high PM 2.5 reading I had before. And I think most of the PM 2.5 is coming from the direction of the Rio Bravo and heading for the school. So you should put on that side of the school, like on the northeast side somewhere, or on maybe on the east side. We'll still catch what's coming from the northeast of the high school in Malaga.
Yeah.
When you put your, maybe you should put it above the school so you get the PM 2.5 from all directions.
All right,
You
thank
hang
you,
a monitor, PM 2.5 monitor really high. And the second thing is the vegetative barriers I don't think do any good because bicyclists will get more exposed. They'll just keep the pollution from the roads in so the bicyclists get exposed to it, and the wind will just blow a different direction. It'll squeeze out between the trees somewhere and hit another target. It's better just to have better filtration and catalytic converters and things that are better and some way to filter out the PM 2.5 and the dust and the VOCs rather than just put vegetative barriers. And the trees will probably die too.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Okay, any final thoughts on group 2?
You know, we're at the supposed implementation stage, and I hate to harp on this, but you know, back in January, February of this year, I suggested that the district come up with a Gantt chart of the major milestones. And once again, I'm going to ask for a Gantt chart of what are the implementation, the steps, and also when are you actually going to do this by months going up to 5 years. You know, what is your timeline here for actual, you know, pulling the projects together, reaching out to the community, implementing this, and also when are we actually going to see budgets for each one of these 12 major line items? Because I would really like to know what is the overhead, how much are we paying staff, and actually how much is actually going into the community.
That's actually both of those things are in the SERP, and I will tell you in the dollar amounts that are going to these projects, that's checks going out to grants. The staff funding is not a part of that. There's not an overhead that's up. So I'm going to let Jess circle back around and show you that stuff, so she can help you with that.
Okay. I'm going to move us forward into the next steps implementation framework and wrap up. Thank you so much. That was a lot, right? These were a lot of great ideas. They've all been captured. There's going to be follow-up, follow up on all of these as they get implemented and as things are feasibly moved forward. So I'm going to hand it to...
Well, and Karen and I just agreed on this. So we're going to type all these up, and we're going to bring them back with responses saying, hey, this was the idea as we heard it, as we understood it. You can correct us if we got it wrong. And this is what the next step is. There's also some ideas that came back for potential new agenda or next agenda topics or future agenda topics. Things like better understanding of locomotives, better understanding of fuel types, activity on where to do enforcement. We'll pick up some of those things here. From the feedback and look to where we can slot them in at a future meeting. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's perfect. I think we really appreciate the discussion that happened tonight. But two, as Jamie said, it's really important that we collectively follow up on all of these things so you have more detail on what those next steps are, what we're going to be doing, so we can keep this discussion moving forward. You have our commitment for that.
And Ivanka?
As a co-host, if there's anyone else on this steering committee that wants to kind of do what I did tonight, or if you're feeling like this was helpful, give us feedback. We just really wanted to get away from that feeling that when we're coming in here, we're having to come to class at really late hours and take in a lot and maybe not get our questions answered, so.
And I'll just say that, after we sort of document this, I'm sure there will be follow-up questions. So I think we want to, work with all of you is what is that ongoing mechanism to keep answering the questions. So if you all have suggestions on that too, they'd be appreciated.
Okay, so we took a vote tonight to look into a potential next meeting in December. The one on the schedule that's next is January 8th, I believe, so make sure that's on your calendars. And I will commit to talk to the district about what...
That's the 11th.
Sorry?
The 11th would be...
It would be the 11th?
We had a December, if we had scheduled... We are usually the second Wednesday, correct? Yeah. So it would be the 11th. We will see if we can make that happen with all the different... We can do a Christmas party. A potluck. Come to my house.
Okay. You're only halfway joking. All right, it's almost an invitation. And really importantly is that February CAR board meeting that's going to be where they make the decision on the SERP. Karen or Jamie, do you have any final thoughts about next steps? Yes?
So I think I have been hearing on and on, especially today, about the implementation plans, that we're not going to make any more changes on the SERP, but we can work on an implementation plan. So that means that we're putting together actually a document that is a companion document to the SERP, that it's titled Implementation Plan, and it has all the specifics, the details, the nitty-gritty details that are not included in the SERP, like the way we, went down into every single strategy for mobile sources today?
I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think Karen and I both feel there needs to be a documentation of things that are discussed that involve implementation. We don't want to assume that, we didn't discuss all 60 strategies today, but I do think our feedback loop on this type of stuff needs to be better. But what that exactly looks like, I don't know.
I would just add, if you have suggestions, please voice them. Maybe not right this second, but let's keep having those conversations about what this needs to look like moving forward.
It may be like pieces of stuff is what I think. Like we discussed maybe 10 strategies tonight, so maybe we come back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Knowing that we then may have to come back and say, hey, here's, implementation on strategy, UG1, which we all agreed to in, November, but hey, we found out in March that something different's happened, so we have to come back and revisit it. That's kind of what, Karen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe it's going through in this incremental process, and that kind of helps us define and refine, was that the right level of detail, and then how do we, continue to move forward on sets, starting tonight with one of the many ones that we talked about.
Yeah, I would agree that whether we're calling this another guidebook or like another implementation appendix, whatever we're going to call it, it definitely needs to be documented, or else how is it a living document and how is it any different than the SERP that that's only gone through so far, and we know that's not complete yet.
Agree, and I think it can also get to some of the things that Lisa was asking for on additional dates and timeframes with another level of specificity, for example.
And that has to include that breakdown of the funding, or how the steering committee wants to change that funding as well.
Or give recommendations how they use the funding to support small businesses, or the details that are not included in the SERP.
Yeah, those sorts of extra nuances of how does it actually manifest itself, yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Karen. Karen, this lovely document that, I've had lots of problems with readability and such, and I know that you have a lot of documents to read in your department. How far along are you in reviewing this document for sufficiency, and are you going to throw any portions of it back to us to look at and clarify?
So we're going through these incrementally as we move forward on each of them. So we're actually, I think we've probably talked to you all, we're starting with West Oakland next month, then we go to Imperial, then we go to the Valley, then we go to South Coast. So that's kind of dictating our individual review and staff reports on all of these. But as we've been talking about here, what we really are looking at is how do we continue to define what implementation looks like, and that informs our recommendations that we make to our board and the discussion that they'll be having when they're in chapter in the Valley.
And I think I would add to that question is, when the SERP is reviewed, are you going to be cross-referencing or cross-checking to the main blueprint guidelines as well? And if those are the pieces that aren't met, will it be specific in how this is good, but this still needs to be improved? Where it's not necessarily a straight denial, but here's the things that still need to.
We are looking in terms of, what's in statute and what's in the blueprint, but it is kind of in the context of now as you're moving to this next milestone of implementation, how do we really strengthen implementation of the program? And some of it can be as we go to what should that next level of detail look like, for example, to make sure that the program is really going to be successful in delivering reductions to the community.
Thank you. Okay, just as a quick reminder as we close, please let me know, or any other CARB or Air District staff know, things that you liked about this meeting, things that you did not like about this meeting that you would like to see differently. This is a little bit of a different format, but please, as we move forward, we want this to work for everybody optimally. What do you? Oh, you can also write it on a flip chart. And if you haven't had an opportunity, I don't see any stickies over there, and you have extra time tonight, please feel free to answer any of those 3 questions. There's stickies at your tables. I understand. If you choose to, that is an option tonight. So I just want to say we've come to the end of the time. You're welcome to stay and answer any of the additional questions, but thank you so much, and we will see you next time. And take extra food home. Thank you.
And thank you to the co-hosting team.